In the vast expanse of the Alliance Command Center, where delegates from a dozen different species debated strategies in a cacophony of tongues, she sat behind a marble pillar, invisible to all. They called her just the Translator, and for years, that had been enough. Her fingers danced across the neural interface, converting the heated arguments of generals and admirals into comprehensible streams of data. The war against the Karzul Empire had dragged on for decades, and the Alliance was losing ground faster than they could manufacture ships. The massive holographic display showed their grim reality in stark detail red zones, spreading across the galactic map, like an infection marking territory lost to the Empire's relentless advance. Dr. Mirabelle Thorne had listened to countless battle reports, translated diplomatic protests, and watched hope drain from the faces of species leaders as world after world fell beneath the Empire's iron fist. But she had always remained in the shadows, content to serve her purpose as a linguistic bridge between civilizations. That was before she discovered the fragment. It happened during a routine data intercept from a captured Karzul vessel. While running the standard translation protocols on the enemy communications, her neural interface flagged an anomaly. Hidden within the tactical reports and supply manifests was a sequence of symbols that defied every linguistic algorithm in the Alliance database. The characters seemed to pulse with an inner light on her screen, arranged in patterns that suggested meaning beyond mere communication. Mirabelle's heart raced as she isolated the fragment. These weren't modern Karzul glyphs, or any variant she'd encountered in 2 decades of linguistic work. They appeared ancient, predating known civilizations by millennia. The mathematical precision of their arrangement suggested they weren't decorative, but functional, like a key, waiting for the right lock. Against all protocols, she copied the fragment to her personal drive. That night, in her cramped quarters aboard the orbital station, Mirabelle pored over the symbols. Sleep eluded her as she ran pattern recognition algorithms, cross-referenced archaeological databases, and even attempted rudimentary decoding based on universal linguistic principles. The characters seemed to shift and change when she wasn't looking directly at them, as if they possessed a life of their own. 3 days later, frustration drove her to seek help. Dr. Alzin, the Alliance's foremost archaeolinguist, was known for his eccentric theories about pre-spaceflight civilizations. Most considered him a harmless academic, more interested in dusty artifacts than military applications. But Mirabelle knew his reputation for solving impossible puzzles. She found him in the archives, surrounded by holographic displays, showing ancient ruins from across the galaxy. His 6 eyes, a trait of his species. The scholarly Veltar blinked in sequence as he studied her fragment. "Fascinating," he murmured, his tentacled fingers, tracing the air above the symbols. "These appear to be predecessor script, but not in any dialect I've encountered. Where did you acquire this?" Mirabelle hesitated. "A captured data cache. I think there might be more." Dr. Alzin's eyes widened. "More, young woman, do you realize what you've discovered? The predecessors weren't merely an advanced civilization. They were the civilization. Their technology shaped matter itself, through linguistic commands. Their ships, their cities, even their weapons were constructed through spoken words that reality itself obeyed." "That's impossible," Mirabelle breathed. "Is it? How do you think the Karzul Empire maintains such technological superiority, despite their relatively recent emergence on the galactic stage?" "They've been reverse engineering predecessor technology for centuries, but they've never understood the underlying principles. They copy without comprehension." Dr. Alzin pulled up historical records, showing images of impossible architecture from dead worlds scattered across the galaxy. Towers that spiraled into dimensions that shouldn't exist, cities that appeared to be grown, rather than built machines that had operated for millennia without any visible power source. "The predecessors understood that language isn't just communication," he continued. "At its deepest level, language shapes reality. They developed a form of speech that could literally rewrite the fundamental laws of physics within a localized area. And this fragment, this might be a construction phrase for their defensive systems." The implications hit Mirabelle like a physical blow. If the Empire had access to predecessor command phrases, even incomplete ones, they could be using them to power their weapons and shields. But if someone could understand the complete language, "We need to examine the source," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The source is likely on Arcanis," Dr. Alzen replied. "An archaeological site I've been requesting access to for years. The bureaucrats always refuse, claiming it's too dangerous due to its proximity to Empire space." Mirabelle straightened. "Then we don't ask permission." The journey to Arcanis required careful planning. Using her translational privileges, Mirabelle accessed shipping manifests and found a supply transport heading to the Outer Rim. Dr. Alzen arranged for essential archaeological consultation, and within a week, they were aboard the freighter Wanderer's Promise, hurtling through hyperspace toward forbidden territory. Arcanis was a desolate world scoured by radiation storms that had raged for millennia. The planet's surface was a patchwork of crystalline formations and ancient ruins, relics of a civilization that had transcended physical limitations. Landing required navigating through electromagnetic anomalies that played havoc with their ship's systems. The Temple of Echoes stood at the planet's equator, a spiral tower that seemed to twist through dimensions human eyes couldn't properly perceive. As they approached, wearing radiation suits and carrying portable atmospheric generators, Mirabelle felt a strange resonance in her mind, as if the structure was recognizing her presence. Inside, the walls were covered with the same symbols from her fragment, but here they formed complete sentences, paragraphs, entire libraries of meaning carved into living stone. Dr. Alzen gasped as his scanning equipment revealed the full scope of the inscriptions. "These aren't just construction commands," he said, his voice crackling through the communicator. "They're architectural blueprints written in pure language, instructions for reshaping matter at the quantum level." Mirabelle approached one of the pristine walls, her gloved hand hovering over the carvings. The symbols seemed to glow brighter at her approach, and she felt an overwhelming urge to speak them aloud. "Don't," Dr. Alzen warned. "We don't know what effect they might have without proper understanding of—" But Mirabelle was already reading the words flowing from her lips with a fluency that surprised her. The ancient syllables rolled off her tongue as if she'd spoken them all her life, each sound creating harmonics that resonated through the chamber. The symbols flared bright enough to see through her helmet's radiation shielding. The chamber responded. Holographic displays materialized in the air, showing star charts that hadn't been accurate for 10,000 years. Technical schematics appeared for devices that defied modern understanding of physics. And at the center of it all, a complete linguistic matrix, the grammar and syntax of reality manipulation itself. "By the void," Dr. Alzen whispered. "It's a teaching chamber. They left instructions for anyone who could read their language." Mirabelle spent hours studying the displays, her neural interface recording everything, while Dr. Alzen provided context from his archaeological knowledge. She learned that the predecessors hadn't disappeared. They had transcended, leaving behind tools for those who would come after. The Karzul Empire had discovered fragments of this knowledge and used it to build their military might, but they had never found the source. Now she had. The return journey took 2 weeks, during which Mirabelle worked feverishly to understand what she'd discovered. The predecessor language wasn't just about construction. It contained protocols for disabling technology built with their principles. If the Empire's weapons and shields were based on corrupted predecessor designs, then the original commands could potentially neutralize them. But when they returned to Alliance space, she faced a new obstacle: the bureaucracy. Admiral Ran, the Alliance's supreme commander, was a veteran of 100 battles and had little patience for academic theories. When Mirabelle requested an immediate audience, she was told to submit her findings through proper channels, a process that could take months. "With respect, Admiral," she said, having gained access to his office through a combination of persistence and Dr. Alzen's influence, "we don't have months. The Empire is marshalling forces for a final assault on Kepler Station. If they take it, the inner worlds will be defenseless." Admiral Ron, a tall humanoid with cybernetic implants, replacing half his face, studied her with a mechanical eye. "You're telling me that our salvation lies in ancient fairy tales, that symbols on a rock can stop the Empire's dreadnought fleet?" "Not stop," Mirabelle corrected. "Neutralize. Their technology is based on corrupted predecessor designs. The original language contains shutdown commands. And you propose to shout at them very loudly." Dr. Alzin stepped forward. "Admiral, I've verified the authenticity of these findings. The theoretical framework is sound. At minimum, we should test the hypothesis under controlled conditions." The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Beyond the transparasteel windows of his office, the lights of Alliance ships could be seen moving in formation, preparing for what many believed would be their last stand. "Fine," he said finally. "One test. But this doesn't leave the command sphere, and if it fails, we never speak of it again." The test was simple in concept, complex in execution. Using fragments of predecessor technology captured from Empire vessels, Alliance engineers constructed a scaled model of a Karzul shield generator. Mirabelle stood before it in a sealed laboratory, Dr. Alzin, and several other scientists monitoring from behind radiation shielding. She spoke the words she'd memorized from the Temple of Echoes, the shutdown command for defensive systems. The sounds were unlike anything in any modern language. They seemed to exist in more dimensions than her throat should have been able to produce. The air itself seemed to vibrate with potential. The shield generator, which had been projecting a stable protective field, flickered once and then died completely. Emergency systems kicked in, trying to reactivate it, but the device remained inert. Further examination revealed that the quantum matrices at its core had been somehow reset to their base state, as if the words had convinced them to simply stop working. The implications were staggering. Admiral Rand called an emergency session of the High Council. Species representatives from across the Alliance gathered in the Great Chamber, their attention focused on Mirabelle as she explained her discovery. The reception was mixed. Some were intrigued, others skeptical, and a few openly hostile to what they saw as dangerous experimentation with forces beyond comprehension. "You're asking us to stake the survival of our civilization on an untested theory," declared Councillor Vex, the Zephyrian representative. "What if it fails? What if speaking these words triggers some dormant predecessor safeguard that destroys us all? The Empire is already using predecessor technology against us." Mirabelle replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "They've perverted it into weapons of conquest. We have the opportunity to use the original language for its intended purpose, to preserve and protect." The debate raged for hours. Some wanted to evacuate the outer colonies and retreat to more defensible positions. Others advocated for diplomatic solutions that had already been rejected by the Empire's fanatic leadership. Through it all, Mirabelle felt the weight of the ancient words in her mind, the knowledge that could save or damn them all. It was Dr. Alzin who provided the crucial argument. The predecessors didn't leave this knowledge by accident. They could have destroyed it when they ascended, but they chose to preserve it. They meant for someone to find it to use it when the need was greatest. That need is now. The vote was close, 7 species in favor, 4 against 1 abstention. Admiral Ron would have command discretion in implementing the plan. As word spread through the fleet of the desperate gambit they were about to attempt, Mirabelle found herself the focus of attention she'd never wanted. Officers who had barely acknowledged her existence now sought her out, asking questions she couldn't answer about powers she was only beginning to understand. The AI assistant she'd worked with for years, designation Thesis, approached her in the data center, where she was making final preparations. Translator Thorn. The AI's voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. "I have analyzed the linguistic patterns you've been working with. They operate on principles that conflict with my baseline programming." "What do you mean?" "My core functions rely on logical linguistic frameworks. The predecessor language appears to bypass logic, entirely interacting directly with quantum reality. If you speak their words during the battle, I may be unable to provide standard translational support. Mirabelle nodded. I understand. I'll be on my own out there. That is incorrect. While I cannot assist with the predecessor language, I can provide contextual support for all other communications during the battle. I will not abandon my post. As she left the data center, Mirabelle realized she would miss the AI's literal interpretations and occasional misunderstandings that had provided moments of levity during dark times. The Empire's fleet arrived 3 days later. Long-range sensors detected them first, a massive armada led by the dreadnought Dominion. A ship the size of a small moon, whose shields had never been breached and whose weapons could crack planets. Admiral Ron ordered the Alliance fleet to formation around Kepler Station, while Mirabelle was escorted to the command bridge of the flagship Harmony. As she stood behind the tactical display, watching enemy ships pour through the hyperspace exit point like locusts, she felt an unexpected calm descend upon her. Dr. Alzin stood nearby, his 6 eyes, tracking multiple displays simultaneously. Their shield generators are already active, he observed. Massive energy signatures across the entire fleet. How many ships? Admiral Ran asked. 2,743, the tactical officer replied, including 17 dreadnoughts and 47 heavy cruisers. The Alliance fleet numbered fewer than 800 vessels. Send the transmission, Admiral Ron ordered. The standard challenge was broadcast on all frequencies, demanding the Empire fleet halt and withdraw from Alliance space. The response came quickly, laughter, followed by a declaration of imminent destruction for all who oppose the Empire's manifest destiny. The first shots were fired by the Empire massive particle beams that lit up space like false stars. Alliance ships responded with their own weapons, but the exchange was clearly one-sided. Empire shields absorbed everything the Alliance threw at them, while their return fire punched through defensive screens like paper. Within minutes, the first Alliance vessels began to die. Admiral, Mirabelle said, stepping forward. It's time. He nodded grimly. All ships execute Pattern Omega. Translator Thorn, you have command authorization for primary communications. The Alliance fleet began a complex maneuver, drawing the Empire ships into a tighter formation to maximize the effect of what was to come. As explosions flared around them and debris filled space with deadly fragments, Mirabelle moved to the primary communications console. The bridge fell silent, except for the distant rumble of the ship's engines and the occasional impact of enemy fire against weakening shields. Every eye was on her as she took a deep breath and began to speak. The words that emerged weren't quite her voice. They carried harmonics that human vocal cords shouldn't have been able to produce, frequencies that seemed to exist beyond the normal spectrum of sound. The bridge's acoustic dampeners struggled to contain the resonance as she spoke, the ancient command for cessation of hostilities, the phrase that told predecessor-based technology to simply stop. The effect was immediate and absolute. Across the Empire fleet, every shield generator, every weapon system, every engine and life support unit built, with even a fragment of predecessor technology, simply stopped. Ships that had been advancing with terrible purpose suddenly found themselves drifting without power. Shields that had withstood the concentrated fire of Alliance fleets collapsed without warning. The Dominion itself, the pride of the Empire and greatest dreadnought ever constructed, went dark. Its massive bulk continued forward on inertia, alone a testament to predecessor engineering principles, perverted into an instrument of war, and then restored to peaceful silence. By the void, someone whispered on the bridge. It worked. But Mirabelle wasn't finished. As she continued speaking, weaving additional commands into the linguistic matrix, the effects spread beyond mere deactivation. Damaged Alliance ships found their hulls spontaneously repairing their systems, coming back online with improved efficiency. The quantum foam between ships began to stabilize, creating safe corridors for evacuation of damaged vessels. The predecessors hadn't just created tools of war, they had built techniques for healing, for restoration, for transforming weapons into instruments of peace. Empire vessels hung helpless in space as Alliance recovery teams moved to assist. There were no further shots fired. How could there be? The very weapons had forgotten how to function in the presence of the true language. In the aftermath, as negotiation teams worked to arrange the formal surrender of the Empire fleet, Mirabelle found herself summoned, once again, to the High Council. But this time, she wasn't standing behind a pillar. She stood at the center of the Great Chamber, as representatives from across the galaxy rose to acknowledge what she had accomplished. Translator Thorn, Admiral Ron, announced, his voice carrying none of its previous skepticism. By unanimous vote of the High Council, and with the gratitude of countless worlds, you are hereby appointed as the Alliance's first architect of predecessor languages with full authority to research and implement ancient linguistic protocols for the preservation of peace. The title felt strange, impossible. Months ago, she had been just the translator, invisible in the shadows. Now she stood before the assembled leaders of galactic civilization, the keeper of words that could reshape reality itself. Dr. Alzin approached her after the ceremony, his 6 eyes twinkling, with what she had learned to recognize as Veltar humor. "So," he said, "I suppose this means no more hiding behind pillars." Mirabelle smiled, looking out at the vast holographic display that showed the galaxy in real time. Where once red zones had marked Empire occupation, now green lights indicated worlds in transition, choosing their own futures, without the shadow of tyranny. "No," she replied. "But I think I'd like to visit a few more temples first. The predecessors left knowledge scattered across 1,000 worlds, and someone needs to collect it all. And then we heal what's been broken. We teach others the true language not for war, but for building something better. The predecessors transcended because they learned that the most powerful words aren't commands, they're invitations. Invitations to grow, to learn to become more than what we were." As Alliance ships began the long work of establishing peace throughout former Empire space, Mirabelle stood before the galactic map and spoke a single word in the predecessor tongue. The holographic display shimmered and transformed, showing not just current political boundaries but potential futures worlds, where different species work together, where ancient knowledge was shared freely, where the voices of even the smallest among them could change the course of history. They had called her just the translator, and perhaps that's all she would ever be. But she had learned that translation wasn't just about converting words from one language to another. Sometimes, it was about finding the one phrase that could bridge the gap between what was and what could be. In the end, that was the most powerful translation of all.